Momo from Twice put this really cool Suicune Pokemon card in her phone case last week, and apparently people had a problem with it. So the problem that people had is that Momo cracked a slabbed version of this card just to put in her phone case. And I've seen so many posts this past week about Momo being under fire for doing this. And all these headlines are saying that collectors are outraged because she devalued a rare graded card. But here, I'll let you in on a little secret. Vendors and collectors crack slabs all the time, but we'll get into why they do that a little bit later. Right now, I'm gonna chime in and give you my take on the situation. And these are my credentials. So first, let's address this alleged outrage. I looked at some posts on X, and this one in particular had almost 2,000 comments. These are the two main complaints that I've been seeing online. One is that she is flaunting her wealth by destroying the monetary value of the card, and two is that she's not an actual fan or collector and she's just doing this for clout or attention. And to be clear, these two complaints are not even the biggest problem in this situation, but before I address what I think is the most glaring issue, let's talk about why these two complaints fall completely flat and have no merit. So very quickly, to build context for people who don't know anything about Pokemon or Pokemon card grading, PSA is the main company that certifies and grades cards based on their condition. So the more pristine the condition or the closer it is to a Gem Mint 10 grade, the higher the price a card can command in the marketplace. Because finding cards, especially older ones that are free of defects or damage, is very rare. So by cracking the slab to put the card in her phone case and on her cheek, so cute! So cute! People believe that she's just thrown away 80% of the card's financial value. First of all, what someone chooses to do with something that they've purchased is entirely up to them. If this was something like food or clothing, then yeah, I would agree with you, but this becomes a question of speculative value versus instrumental value. The value of Pokemon cards is not driven by its real-world utility. It's not something that you can eat. It doesn't shelter you, it doesn't cure illness. So the value of this card, whether it's graded or not, is just based on how much people are willing to pay for it in the marketplace. And here's the thing with grading cards, and I might get heat for this, but I think grading is a scam. At this point in time, grades are determined by human judgment, and yes, PSA has their criteria for grading, but at the end of the day, that is still subject to human interpretation. It is entirely possible that the exact same card given to two different graders can come back with two completely different grades. So if this is how we're determining the value of these cards, then in my view, this is an unreliable measure of value. Combine this with the cards being priced out based on speculation, then the resale value that she's throwing away is just an arbitrarily made up number with no real basis. And I mentioned at the beginning of this video that vendors and collectors crack slabs all the time. This is 100% true, and here's why. This applies mainly to modern cards. Let's look at this card for example. So this beautiful Mega Charizard EX that is almost a year old now. Look at the price difference between a 9 and a 10. It is more than double. But here's something even more interesting. Look at the price difference between a PSA 9 and an ungraded raw version of the card. The price is practically the same. And an important thing to note here is the term ungraded means that the card is in very good condition. It's basically been pulled straight from a pack and put into a sleeve, so it could very likely grade anywhere between an 8 and a 10. And the thing that happens is that when someone believes very strongly that their card can grade a 10, they will submit it to PSA for grading, and when it comes back, let's say they get a 9. They still think they can get a 10, so they'll crack the slab, resubmit it, and hope that they get a Gem Mint 10. Now, let's look at one grade lower than 9. So this 8 here actually costs less than the ungraded version. So what do you think is gonna happen? Vendors will buy the 8, they will crack the slab, and they will sell it as ungraded to someone who hopes that they can get a 9 or a 10, which it probably won't. And the vendor has now just made an extra 8 to 10% on their investment. This is why, personally, I'm not a big fan of grading in Pokemon, and that is my personal bias as someone who is mainly a fan of the art, the games, and just a player of the actual card game itself. I've collected Pokemon cards since I was a child, and I do not own a single slab because I'm mainly in the hobby for personal enjoyment. And yes, of course, there is a financial aspect to collecting even my own, so I won't be throwing shade at people who are in it just for financial reasons. But let's not criticize other people for what they choose to do with their own possessions, right? Like, come on. If collectors and investors want to take some moral high ground here, I don't think that's right, because where some are driven by financial gain, Momo's action of breaking this slab is driven mainly by sentimental value and appreciating the card in a way where she can show her interests publicly, which in my opinion is much closer to what the spirit of Pokemon was actually meant to be versus what it has become today. Pokemon was meant for children to fall in love with the world of Pokemon and to explore the idea of going on an adventure with your little virtual friends. It was never intended to be a financial instrument. Again, I'm not putting anyone down who uses Pokemon as an investment, because that's just what the system has created, but let's not pretend that Momo is breaking some sort of unspoken moral code here. As for the second point, I think this is very straightforward. Someone implied that Momo is not a real fan or a real collector and that she's just doing this for clout. Momo is a Japanese idol born in 1996.
Made in Japan.
This is a Japanese Pokemon card from 2003. Momo was 7 years old and living in Japan when this card came out. She is literally the target audience of this Pokemon card. Since we've addressed these issues, let me finally get down to the real problem. When I saw all of these posts and all of these headlines, immediately I said to myself, I was like, I'm gonna have a field day. I'm gonna find all these people that are upset at Momo, and I'm gonna defend Momo with everything I have. I'm gonna dismantle all their arguments about Momo and attacking her enjoyment of Pokemon. And as I went into these comment sections, I realized that no one is actually mad. No one cares that she did this. The two comments that I showed you earlier are the only two comments I found of people being upset. And I'm actually happy to see that, because it's really not a big deal at all. But this outlines the real problem. These news pages and update accounts are just making up inflammatory headlines criticizing idols for the sole purpose of driving engagement. It's like they're trying to incite outrage. It's like they're trying to get people upset at Momo, which is overall just a terrible thing to do. Like here, look at this post by 9gag. Twice as Momo sparks debate after opening and using graded Pokemon card as phone decoration. And the caption is, a PSA 10 is valued at around $813. So the slab that Momo cracked was a PSA 9. I can see that in the picture and I know what that means. For someone who has no idea about Pokemon or Pokemon card grading, they're gonna think this was an $800 card. When the reality is, as I've shown you before, a PSA 9 goes for like 30 to 40% of the value of a PSA 10. So it is drastically differing in price. Another post on Facebook says Twice as Momo is under fire for breaking open a graded vintage Pokemon card just to stick it in her phone case. I don't see the fire anywhere. She's not under any fire. A post on Instagram says K-pop star Momo is facing backlash after she opened a vintage graded Pokemon card to place it on her face and keep it inside her phone case. Can you show me these people who are giving this backlash? Like, I don't see any backlash happening. Literally, no one is upset. Nobody thinks this. And this page is just making up these headlines hoping it's going to gain traction, which it did, because I've been seeing these types of posts and articles all over the place. So moral of the story is, don't believe everything you read and don't fall for the engagement bait. We have to stop giving these attention-seeking pages the views and comments.
I say as I actively seek your views and comments.
Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments, and I will catch you in the next one.